You're listening to Feathers, a podcast of stories of women walking in faith. I hope these stories inspire you and encourage you to take flight in your own faith. I'm your host, Amy Bennett, and this is Season 7, Episode 2. Feathers is an outreach of Abiding Ministries. Find more encouragement at abidingministries.net. Well, hey friend, and welcome back to Feathers This Week. This week we have Beth Herring. Beth and I just had a chance meeting recently. I saw her comment on someone's post on Facebook, and I was just so interested in her story that I reached out to her to see if she would share her entire story on the podcast. I mean, I don't know if you just have those moments where you contact somebody or get in contact with them or whatever, and you can just sense someone has a deep faith. And I immediately got that from just chatting with Beth, even on Facebook, through our I Am conversation. And she has some amazing stories to share with you today. I'm so glad she came on the podcast. I think it's going to inspire you like it did me. So let's go ahead and get to it. Here is my conversation with Beth Herring. Well, hey, Beth, and welcome to Feathers today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
I would love if we can start out. You can introduce yourself, your family, and what keeps you busy these days.
Okay. Well, my name is Beth Herring, and I am 55 years old. And my husband, Jimbo, and I have been married for 32 years. We have 3 grown daughters who have given us 9 grandchildren, so they keep us pretty busy when they're all at home. Our oldest daughter has 5 children. Our youngest daughter has 4 children, and our middle daughter's not married yet. She's in med school in London, so we possibly could have more grandchildren on the way.
Oh my goodness, 9.
Yes.
You must stay busy and love it, huh? I hear it's a great season.
It is a great season, and we miss them when we're gone, but it gives us something to look forward to when we come back.
Yeah, and what's the age ranges?
The baby just turned 4, and our oldest granddaughter will be 15 in November.
Oh my goodness, you guys got pretty much every age in between.
We do. They took turns having babies every other year.
Oh my gosh, that's exciting. So my sister, I have just one sister, and she just had her first last year, and oh my gosh. So between the two of us, we have 4, I guess. But oh man, it was so fun to watch my sister have a baby. So I can't imagine doing that 4 or 5 times.
That's right.
Well, very good. So tell me a little bit about you guys. Tell me where you're located.
We live in northeast Louisiana, a small town called Oak Grove, and it was actually the town that my husband was born and raised in. We moved here when our youngest daughter was a year old, and we've been here ever since then.
Okay, so you have to teach me a little bit. How do you say your state?
Well, Louisiana.
Louisiana.
But when you're from here, you say Louisiana.
Louisiana.
Right.
Louisiana. Okay, I say Louisiana. That's wrong, though, right?
Well, yeah, right. That's probably correct.
Louisiana.
But we say Louisiana.
Louisiana. Okay, I'm gonna try to say it correctly from now on.
Okay.
I want to say it like a local.
That's right.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about you guys. You and your husband are, well, what would you call? Do you have a title? Full-time missionaries?
Well, we pretty much just say that we're full-time evangelism and missionaries, because our work takes us. We do mission work in Nicaragua, but we also, when we're home in the States, we spend a lot of time raising money for our mission, and so we do a lot of evangelism. So we kind of use both those terms.
Okay. All right. And so we are going to talk a lot about your transition into that today. So you talked about that you're doing work in Nicaragua. So tell me, goodness, there's so many things to talk about. I would love to know your connection to Nicaragua. Talk about, you guys were actually full-time, he was full-time pastor, right? And then you guys made the transition. So tell me all about that.
Okay. My husband surrendered the pastorate, actually whenever he was a teenager. But as most teenagers do, he kind of strayed away from that call for a little while. And so when we got married, he was not a pastor. He had strayed from that call and not gone back to it. And the Lord called him back in about 1993. So then he became a pastor in 1994, and we actually pastored 2 churches for a little over 20 years. In August of 2014, we were in Africa for a couple of weeks doing mission work with a friend of ours over there. when we both felt the tug of missions on our heart very strongly. We had previously done mission work in Nicaragua once a year for the week that you go there and you think that you're really making a big difference, and you come home after 7 days and think you've really done something, and then you don't see it again for another year. And so while we were in Africa, he just really was laying on our hearts that he was calling us to missions, and we really thought that we were going to be in Africa full time, which was really hard for me because of the 3 girls and the 9 grandchildren. It was really hard for me to think about being that far away from them. But we surrendered. We hadn't told our church yet, but we surrendered to him and began praying about it. And we came back to the States in September. And as we began praying and seeking the Lord and what he would have for us, he revealed to us that our call was really going to be in Nicaragua, which made my heart happy, my mama heart and my nana heart happy. And it's like he was just trusting us, he was testing us to see what we would do if we would answer the call. So when we surrendered, we gave our resignation to our church in November, and our first trip actually wasn't until February of the next year. We aren't supported by the Southern Baptist Mission Board. We aren't supported by any mission group. When we left the church, we left with no money, no place to live, and we had absolutely no idea what God was going to do. He provided a place for us to live. He provided the mission field to us just little by little. We went in February, and he began introducing us to people, and we would meet somebody, and then they would introduce us to somebody else. And so just little by little, our mission field just expanded. And so it's been not even 3 years yet, and what he has done down there just totally blows our minds. We had no money in the bank. We didn't even know how we were going to buy our first plane ticket there, what we were going to do when we got there. And we just continued just to pray and trust him and just move forward little by little. And now we stay down there about a month at a time, and then we come home for a period of a month or so and raise more money to go back down there and do what he's called us to do. We build churches. We teach the women. We go and we do preaching. We do Bible school for the children. We just do so many different things. There's really not just one thing that we could say our mission is, except just letting him show us the need, and then we just do what we can to meet that need.
So I have to go back
okay.
to that time when you were deciding whether to leave. I just can imagine if you've been pastoring for 20 years, you've got to be thinking, what is the congregation going to think, and how are we going to take care of ourselves? And, what was the tipping point that, really helped you guys to take that jump?
Yeah, and it was really hard for me, too, as well, because I didn't fly, and I still don't like to fly. And so the thought of having to get in a plane every other month or so and fly was just enough to make me decide I couldn't do that. And then I don't speak in front of people, and that's what he was calling me to do. So he was really stretching me and really taking me out of my comfort zone. But the thing about the church was, the church that we were preaching in at that time was actually my husband's home church when he was a child. It's a church that he grew up in. It was a church that he got saved in. It was a church that he was licensed to preach in. And so he had come full circle and was back pastoring these ladies and these men that had taught him growing up, that he had worked for and known. And so it was really a special place. We'd been there 8 years, and they really expected him to retire there. And we really thought that we would too. We were very happy and very comfortable there. And our kids were all in this town, and our grandkids, so it was really hard. But, you just know when the Lord is putting something on your heart, he gets you to the point where you're unsettled. And we had went from being so happy at the church. We weren't dissatisfied, but we were just very unsettled in our hearts. And we just knew that if we stayed there, that we were going to be going against the Lord's will, and that we just did not have a choice but to leave. And they thought we were crazy at first because they were like, what are you going to do? I mean, where are you going to get your money? Where are you going to go? And we're just like, I don't know. We don't know where we're going to go. We don't know what we're going to do. We don't know how we're going to get the money. But we just know this is what the Lord's telling us to do. And they took up a love offering for us on our last Sunday there, and that's the money that we had to start our mission. And now it's just like He's pouring it in so fast that it just blows our minds what He has done. We've built 9 churches. We've helped people find water. We've bought horses for pastors in the mountains that need horses. We bought a van for a missionary over there who needed transportation. And, I mean, He just pours it in from places that we just never would have dreamed it would have come from. We had a lot of people that said at the beginning they would support our ministry. And those people, most of them haven't supported us at all. And our support has come from different churches in the area, but individuals who maybe we didn't even know at the time. And they have just seen the work, and they send us money, and we take it and build a church, and we come home and they're like, okay, we're going to send you some more. And so it's just been amazing.
I do, going back to what you were talking about, just having God put something on your heart, and just, it's kind of like you just can't not do it. You get to a point where, you just have to do it. There's just no peace in your life. You just know you're going to just be miserable, basically.
And missions is something that we all, I think, we have a heart for. It tugs at our hearts when we see these missionaries come and share with us. But I was reading a book by A.W. Tozer during that time, and I came across a quote that he said, "Do we weep and pray over beautiful truth, only to draw back from that same beautiful truth when it comes to putting it into practice?" And that really has stuck with me, that it's enough to say that we feel for these people and we want to help these people, but we got to be doers of the word. And that's what the Lord has showed us, that it's about, okay, what are you going to do? You can't just say it, but what are you going to actually do? And about 1.5 years ago, we met a man named Alejandro, who is the president of 80 churches in the Nicaragua whole country. And most of them, about 60 of them, are up in the mountains. And so we have legally aligned with them. Our 501c3 has aligned with their NGO in Nicaragua. And so we are associated with these 80 churches. And so that's where most of our work is now. And so we're going to these places where nobody goes because they're hard to get to. Walking up in the mountains, in the rocky terrain up a goat trail, or where there's boa constrictors on the side, or you're walking on the side of a mountain, or riding a horse. I'm 55 years old, and I find myself doing things that I can't believe that I do. We go to these places where there's no water, no electricity, where things are just different and things are hard. But it's like when you go there and these people, they know that we love them. And we get to see some of the same people. We go to these villages and we see a need, and then we get to go back sometimes months later and give them the money to build their church. And it's like they see that we do care about them. We love them, and we're not just saying we're going to build you a church. We came to do it. And so it's just unbelievable. I mean, we've been home for not even a week yet, and I'm already ready to go back. And we've got things to do here, so I know that we have some fundraising to do. We've got several churches that we've got to build, that we need to build, and so we've got a lot of work to do here in the States. But already my heart is aching to be back in the country.
Wow. That's just incredible. And I think it's just so challenging to think about. I think that quote's going to stay with me too, is to read the beautiful truth, but what about putting it into action? So I would love to hear, I know you've already talked about some of the things that you guys have done, and how God has provided, but do you have any, particular stories of things you've just seen that you just know that God was in it?
Well, our work began in Nicaragua about 10 years ago. That was my very first mission trip, was in 2007. And I was terrified because I'd never been on an airplane before. And I was 48 years old and I'd never flown, and I really didn't think I ever would. And so it was really a huge thing for me to get on that airplane and go in the first place. But when we got there, just the people, just the reception we got, just the adoration of the Lord that they had, it just really did something to my heart, and it really pricked something inside of me that as we went back year after year, I really just, I just felt that draw to come back. But in 2012, as we were getting ready to leave one morning and head back to the States with our team, our rental van got stolen. And so we had no way to get to the airport. It was a few of us that spoke very little Spanish, but we happened to be staying at a little cabin where a couple that we now are dear friends with owned these cabins for mission work, and we did not know that at the time. So they wound up having to take us to the airport. My husband wound up having to stay in Nicaragua to file a report about the stolen van, and we all got to fly home. But while he was here for those few days, he went to church with a pastor friend there. And while he was there, a man prophesied over him. And he came up to him and prophesied in English to my husband, only to find out about an hour later that the man spoke no English at all. So he told my husband, he said, "You don't understand why this has happened to you at this point, but the Lord sent you here for this time, for me to tell you this, that you and your wife are going to do mighty things for the people of Nicaragua, and just keep your eyes on him." And so that was now 5 years ago that happened. So it was about 2 years after that fact that we hadn't really thought about that when we surrendered to missions. And then when we met these friends again, we were kind of talking about how we met them that many years ago, and remembered what this man had said. And so even then, the Lord knew what he was going to do with us.
Oh my gosh, so that's even before you guys left. This guy said this. Oh my gosh, that's incredible. That's almost like, that's really like an Acts thing, right? Where everybody's
right.
speaking languages. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's really incredible. Like, gives me chills up and down.
Yeah.
For him to be able to do that, and then just to see how that's been played out so far. What about people in Nicaragua? What changes have you seen with the people there?
Well, when we first went in 2007, there was still very little electricity in a lot of places, and there was, I guess the country was a little still back in the early 1900s, and there's been a lot of changes in the big cities, like in Managua, which is the capital. It's like 1.5 million people, so it's pretty Americanized in a lot of places. But we do our ministry mainly up in the mountains. So when we fly into Managua, we drive about 5 hours up into the mountains where our ministry takes place. So when you get up in those areas, it's like going back in time. The people do have cell phones now, little track phones. The president, Ortega, has made sure that people have access to that. But we still go in places where the people are still, they have dirt floors in their homes, and we don't even have electricity at the camp where we have our mission house at this point. And so things are just a lot different. They have progressed a little bit as far as the roads and things like that, but up in the mountains it's just totally different. But it's such a laid-back atmosphere that we really love it. They don't get stressed out about time. They don't get stressed out about having to be somewhere in a hurry. If they tell you church is going to start at 6, it's probably going to be 7 before they really get started, but it doesn't really matter, because they're going to stay until you're done. It's just such a different atmosphere.
Culture, yeah.
It is, and it's just, we love it. It's just amazing.
I'm just curious, when you kind of said that you guys really don't have what you might say an agenda for what you guys are working on. You kind of wait till something is revealed. In general, I would love to know, how do you guys seek God for what's next? Is it just something, I mean, do you guys, I don't know, I'm just curious about your prayer life and what that kind of looks like as you're seeking Him.
Well, it's fun to have a husband who is your prayer partner, and we both got saved when we were 9 years old. We both grew up in Christian homes, and so we both grew up with a knowledge of the Bible and what the Lord can do. And I mean, He performed a miracle in my life when I was 10 years old and healed me. And so I've seen many miracles take place in my life and my family's life over the years. So I know that He's a wonderful, amazing, miraculous God. And so I know He can do all these things. And the thing about Jimbo and I is that sometimes when I'm weak, He's strong. And then whenever He's weak, I'm strong. So when I start having some doubts about things, He'll tell me, now, Beth, remember, I mean, just think about what the Lord's done. Just remember. And then sometimes whenever He's faltering a little bit, I have to pick him up and do the same thing. When we were there this last month, we went down there. Our friend Sigard picks us up at the airport. And then he is our interpreter. He's our van driver, and he goes with us everywhere we go. And so we went up to the mountains, and we went to some new churches and did Bible school with the team that we took for the first week. Then after that, we went to the West Coast to do some new churches that we'd never been in with this MFL Association, which stands for Mission, Evangelism, Faith, and Liberty. And they were actually started by Franklin Graham many, many, many years ago. And so it's a pretty neat story of how MFL came about as well. But so while we're out and we go to do services, and I do women's ministry, and then we have joint services, we just kind of listen to the people, and then they kind of share what their vision for their church is or what their need is. And so it's just so weird that both of us will just look at each other like, yeah, this is it. This is where we're going to build our next church. It's like He just, I don't know, it's just He imparts something in both of us at the same time. And we both always have that exact same thing. I have never felt like the Lord was going to build a church in a place that He didn't feel the very same thing. And so it's just, I don't know, it's just the way the Lord works. You don't want to say it's anything mystical, or it's just, He just puts that in your spirit where you just know. It's like He's just saying, yeah, this is it. This is going to be your next church. And so we come home, and we had a need this time. We needed $10,000 to build a church and a parsonage. And so we got home on Tuesday, and a guy calls us and says, hey, I'm having a hunting association for Labor Day this weekend at our camp. Well, we're going to raise money for you guys. So we're like, oh, that's great. Okay, so we'll come, and we'll say the blessing over the meal, and then they'll, share what they raised for us. And you know how much money they raised?
I'm going to guess $10,000.
$10,000.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And it's just like, we just look at each other like, you're kidding me. I mean, the Lord just, here it is. Here's the money for that church and that parsonage. And so now, we're just ready to get back down there and share this with the people. But He does that all the time. I mean, it's just absolutely unbelievable.
Well, I love that you talked about that, how you and your husband are both such in sync. Just personally, I just interviewed somebody for this podcast, and she was talking about how God was leading them to move states, and they were both sitting in church, and, she just knew that God was using the pastor to tell them just to confirm that they were supposed to move. And she just looked at her husband, and he was, looking at her like he already knew. It's just like God really did was speaking to them at the same time. And I've heard my parents are really great people of faith, and she has talked to me several times about how just what you were talking about how you both pick each other up. When one of you are down, the other one is up, and you kind of just keep encouraging each other. I just think that's such a beautiful picture of marriage. And I don't know, I think that's really cool how God uses both of you as a team.
Yeah, we get the opportunity to bless so many people while we're there, and we try to bless the pastors with money when we go to their churches, because a lot of these pastors, I mean, it's just so different there. They might make $100 a month. Their church, that may be all they can pay them. A lot of these people are picking coffee beans for $2 and $3 a day, trying to feed their family. And so we try to bless each one of them. And sometimes we just want to bless them more just because the Lord's put it on our hearts. And I know this last trip we hit the ATM like 3 days in a row for $800 every time. And it just kind of makes me a little nervous. And I look at him like, okay, this is our third time, and he's like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. The Lord's got it. The Lord's got it, And then you get home and someone sends you a check, for what you've spent. And you just know that we can't ever go wrong listening to what he's leading us. We can't outgive him, and we can't ever go wrong by blessing other people. And it's gotten to where when the Lord pours this money into us, it's like never, ever does it do anything inside of me like, oh man, now I can go get me a new dress. Or it's like, oh wow, I can build a church. It's like what he shows us is what we can do down there, because we don't need anything. We are drowning in our abundance in America. And it's just sickening. It really is.
Well, I was going to ask about that. You guys have spent so much time in another country. American Christianity, goodness, there's so much even infighting within Christianity, American Christianity. What are your thoughts? Not about everything that's going on, but what is something that you just wish American Christians could get?
I wish they could understand why you really come to church, because it's sad that I have to go there to really experience the freedom of the Holy Spirit in worship. And we come home and we worry so much about what somebody else is thinking, or we worry about what they're going to say. But we come to Church America for the wrong reasons. We build these beautiful $1 million facilities with soft cushions on the pews and beautiful carpet on the floors, and we have ceiling fans, and we have all these luxuries that we think that are necessary. And we've got people down there that just want concrete on their floor. And it's hard for us when we see our church spending $70,000 to remodel something that didn't need to be remodeled. And to us, that represents 10 churches. We could have built 10 churches for that much. People that don't have a building at all. We had a service last month in a new church plant, and we were on a dirt, muddy floor in the pouring down rain. It was a pavilion of sorts. It had a roof. It had no sides. It was thundering and lightning, and the electricity on their little sound system was going in and out on their little microphone that they had. We couldn't even hear ourselves speak. It was so loud. And nobody in the congregation ever budged from the church. Nobody ever looked up like, oh, wow, the weather's getting bad. We might need to. What happened was everybody just kept scooting their chairs closer and closer to the altar. And it's like the Lord was just showing us, you just scoot up by me and you ain't got to worry about anything else. And it was one of the most powerful services that we had been in. We were anointing this young man. Pastor Allen is the new pastor of this church, a 30-year-old unmarried Nicaraguan guy. No place to live, but just this little pavilion of a church. And it was one of the most powerful anointing services that I've ever been in. And the people had nothing, but they just had a desire to get close to Jesus. And I just wish we could have that same feeling in our hearts here, that we would just want to scoot up close to Jesus. He is just the most amazing thing in the world, and he has been so faithful. He has been so good. Even when things don't go the way we thought they would, they've always gone the way he ordained. And you can't put a price on that.
Mm. So I'm curious, you're talking about the American church and obviously the abundance that we see within the church, and, are we really going to church for the right reason? So then, my mind flips, maybe on the opposite side of that, and people might say, well, I don't even need to go to church at all. We don't even need buildings. I can be a Christian without going to church. And yet you guys your efforts are going into building churches in Nicaragua. So what benefit have you seen of people gathering in a church, and what has it done for their community? Like, what difference does it make?
Well, to me, it makes a huge difference, because when you have a building to gather in, you have that fellowship with other believers. You have that unity. And I think that's very important for us. You know, I've had people tell me that before. I don't have to go to church to worship. No, you certainly don't. But there's something about the strengthening of your spirit whenever you gather with people who are like-minded. And when you come together in that cooperative worship, I think it's very important. You can have church by yourself. Certainly you can. And we've had to do it before in, certain circumstances whenever you don't have a place to go. But there's just something about a community. And in Nicaragua, when you build a church building, then they'll come gather. It's just an amazing thing. Their attendance will double or triple overnight when they actually have a roof over a place to gather together and worship. And they know how to have church. I've never, ever seen people sing to the Lord from the depths of their spirits like I've seen down there. Even the little children, you can hear someone singing outside of a church and you might think it's 10, 15 people, 100 people, and you walk in, it's about 10 or 15. They just sing with everything they have, and it's just so beautiful. But I don't know, there's just something about a church, but I just think we put too much stock in what the church looks like instead of what it represents.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like church is integral still to our faith.
Yeah.
I'm working this out in my head, like, okay, so we're in America, we're so abundant, do we even need these buildings at all? And yet there does seem to be a value in, and I think so too. That for me, that's what church does. There's a value in gathering with other believers.
Right.
And having that fellowship and unity and hearing the word and worshiping.
Definitely.
And even though it may not be, what it probably could be,
right.
There's still value in that. So that's interesting. I appreciate your perspective on that. So is there anything, else that you want to share maybe that God has done, or, I don't know, just anything you would like to share with the listeners as they're hearing your stories?
We had been to this one church, it'd be 2 years ago in October, and we came to this little Methel church for the first time, and it was a little wooden church. It was falling down, it was leaking, it was pouring down rain. Up in the mountains, it rains a lot. It was a mud floor, and the people were just packed in there. We could hardly even get in there. There was people outside looking in the windows, and but it was just an amazing service. And so when it was over with, we had talked to Pastor Henry and his wife, and they told us they'd been praying for a church. And so we told them that we would go to pray for it, pray about building them a church. And that actually was the first Methel church that we built in Nicaragua, and that was almost 2 years ago. But when we left there, we had to take another man's truck out because we couldn't get our van out and we were stuck in the mud. And so we were headed up the mountain back to San Juan where we were staying that night, and a fog settled down around our van like a white blanket. It was like someone had just dropped a blanket over our van and we couldn't see a thing. And we were on this winding mountain road with no guardrails on the edge, and had absolutely no idea where we were on the road. Cigar was trying to slow down, and I was in the back seat with Alejandro and his wife, and we started praying, and we were trying to roll down the windows and look out, and we could not see a thing. And so we began just praying the Lord and asking him to please, keep us from plunging off the mountain to our death. I always tell him I don't want to plunge anywhere, not in a plane or not off of a mountain. And so about that time, Sigard, our driver, said, I think I see a yellow line. And I said, well, Sigard, I don't want you to think that you see a yellow line. I want to know that you can see this yellow line. I said, I don't see anything, so you're going to have to tell me that you see it. He said, I really think I see it. And I said, I'm going to tell you what, you stay on that yellow line. I said, you follow that yellow line and don't get off of it. I said, you don't go to the left, you follow that yellow line and you get us to where we're going. So as we were praying, he drove and followed what he saw as a yellow line down that road. And we finally, about 20 minutes later, broke out of the fog and got up to San Juan. Well, the next morning, as we were coming back down the mountain road, I had to go back to this same church to do a women's conference. And as we came through where that fog hit us, it just about blew my mind when I saw what the Lord had brought us through. I was like, I can't believe that we made it through this mountain road. I mean, there was no yellow line. It was just paved little blocks on the road, and it was just curvy switchbacks, and we just all looked at each other like, oh my goodness, how in the world did we get to where we were going? And the Lord just spoke to my spirit, and he said, you followed that line. You followed that yellow line, and that's me. And if you'll just follow me just like you did last night, and you won't look to the left and worry about anybody over there, you look to the right, you just follow me down that road, and I'm going to take you right where you're going. And that's pretty much what we've tried to do. We've tried to just follow him and not worry about anything else except what the Lord is showing us to do. And he hasn't steered us wrong. I mean, he shows us, he gives us the need, and then he meets that need. And then we go down there and we make it come into fruition. And we're going to do it as long as he continues pouring in. We're just going to continue pouring it out.
Oh my goodness. So yellow line, hello. That's like just miracle. Oh my gosh, that's incredible that he did that.
It was pretty scary.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. It actually reminds me, and I'm sitting here trying to rack my brain over the woman that I actually interviewed for this podcast, but she was saying that she was about in a wreck, and while, like, in slow motion, she's having this wreck, and God just showed her, like it was like a track that showed up, like a path that showed up on the road, and she followed that path and she did not wreck. But how God just provided that right on the road, it just reminds me exactly of that, and just how, like God is the same here, and that was in California, I think, and then in Nicaragua, and it's amazing what he can do. And just what he said after that, just follow me and don't look to the left or the right. Like, how powerful is that? Oh my gosh, that really brings tears to my eyes to think about that. And that's really what it is all about, is just following him wherever he says to go.
Right. That's exactly right.
Oh my goodness. So I think I'm actually going to just wrap right there. That's so, I think that's just perfect words for us today. Well, Beth, thank you so much for sharing what God has done and continues to do through you and your husband. I just wonder, do you guys have any sort of public Facebook page or website or something if people want to connect with you?
Mm-hmm. We do. We are I Am Ministries, and our Facebook page is I Am Ministries International. And then we also have a website where I blog that is bethandjimherring.com. Okay. And I try to post things and keep things on there and keep people up to date with what's going on in our ministry.
Oh my goodness, it sounds like that could be a full-time job. Very cool what God is doing. So thank you again so much for sharing today.
Thank you, Amy.
Wow, is that not just amazing, the stories that Beth shared? I just think the whole thing is just amazing, actually. I think it's just a big deal to leave the pastorate. I mean, especially after 20 years of serving. And so often you hear stories of people that are following God's call to be a pastor, but not often do you hear the stories of people leaving the pastorate to follow God. So I just think the fact that they had zero idea how they were going to have income and what they were going to do, it was like literally stepping off a cliff and not knowing if you'd fly on the way down. But goodness, isn't it so cool how God has provided the funds they needed just for their family, and then what they need for the projects that God put before them. I just think it's so cool how they just let the Lord lead as they go. And God has provided safety and direction. I mean, weren't those like really miraculous stories? I mean, just incredible. I don't know about you, but that really just encourages me, inspires me. It makes me want to lean in even more to what God is calling me to do and to live a life fully surrendered like that. It's so, so good. So one thing I want to start doing is closing out our time with our podcast with a short prayer. So wherever you are, let me say a quick prayer over us. Lord Jesus, thank you so much for this time that we have had listening to what you have been doing in Jim and Beth's life. It's just really amazing, and we are in awe and wonder at your work. I just thank you for what you are doing to bring your gospel to all parts of the world, and that even one day it excites me to think about that I will see these people face to face that are believers. Just thank you for that. I just pray that you continue to minister to them, to the people that they are ministering to, that you would continue to bring in the funds and the direction and the safety and provision, everything that they need to continue their ministry. I just thank you for the people that are listening today, right this very second, to this podcast. Thank you for bringing them to this moment to be able to be encouraged by the work that you are doing. I just pray that we would fully surrender to the work that you have for us so that we can see you work through us and do the work that you have planned for us from the beginning of time. I just thank you for what you're going to do. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, I want to invite you guys over to our social media accounts. We're on Instagram over at Abiding Ministries. We're also on Facebook at facebook.com/Abiding Ministries. And I've actually been doing a live video every weekday morning, and I have been having so much fun with that. We do like a 10-minute devotional together. It's so good. So I would love for you to check that out. Just also make sure you're on our email list. You can subscribe over at abidingministries.net for that. All right, guys, that is going to be it for this week. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next week on Feathers.